गिरिवारधारी यशोदानन्दन व्रजजनरञ्जनाय जमुनातीरवनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपीजन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानन्दन व्रजजनरञ्जनाय जमुनातीरवनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपीजन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानन्दन व्रजजनरञ्जनाय जमुनातीरवनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपीजन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानन्दन व्रजजनरञ्जनाय जमुनातीरवनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपीजन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानन्दन व्रजजनरञ्जनाय जमुनातीरवनचारी यमुनातीरवनचारी यमुनातीरवनचारी Jam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pravijacharya Stora Shishyamat's Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki. Jam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pravijacharya Stora Shishyamat's Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki. Ananti Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki. Naam Acharya Slaridas Thakur Ki. Prem se कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसरि गौर भक्तवृंद की. श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की. वृंदावन नवदीप धाम की. गंगामाय जमुनामाय की. भक्ति देवी तुलसी देवी की. सामवेद भक्तवृंद की. निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. So, we're going to be reading from the Bhagavatam, 4th canto. Chapter 9, 26 and 27. I'll read just 26 and then we could do 27. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So I'll just read 26 first. Maitra uvacha itya archita sa bhagavan adisyatmana padam balasya pasyato dhamma swam agad garuda dvaja. The translation. The great sage Maitreya said, after being worshipped and honored by the boy Dhruva Maharaj, and after offering him his abode, Lord Vishnu, on the back of Garuda, returned to his abode as Dhruva Maharaj looked on. Purport, the short purport. From this verse it appears that Lord Vishnu awarded Dhruva Maharaj the same abode in which he resides. His abode is described in Bhagavad Gita, Yad Gatva na nivantanti tad dhamma paramam mamam. So that's 26. So we'll do 27. I will do Sa api sankalpajam Vishnu padaseva upasaditam prapya sankalpa nirvanam na atiprita abhyagat puram. Suapi sankalpajam Vishnu. Suapi sankalpajam Vishnu. Padasevo pasaditam. Padasevo pasaditam. Prapya sankalpa nirvanam. Prapya sankalpa nirvanam. Nati prito abhyagat puram. Suapi sankalpajam Vishnu. Padasevo pasaditam. Prapya sankalpa nirvanam. Nati prito abhyagat puram. Suapi sankalpajam Vishnu. Padasevo pasaditam. Prapya sankalpa nirvanam. Nati prito abhyagat puram. Swapi sankalpajam Vishnu. Padasevopasaditam Prapya Sankalpa Nirvanam Nati Prito Abhyagat Puram Sapi Sankalpajam Vishnu Padasevopasaditam Prapya Sankalpa Nirvanam Nati Prito Abhyagat Puram Pasaditam Abhyagat Puram Sankalpa Nirvanam Sankalpajam Vishnu Sankalpajam Vishnu Padasevopasaditam Prapya Sankalpa Nirvanam Nati Prito Abhyagat Puram. Anybody else would like to try? Swapi Sankalpajam Vishnu Padasevopasaditam Prapya Sankalpa Nirvanam Nata Prita Abhyagat Puram. Okay, we'll do the word for word. Sa, he Dhruva Maharaj. Api, although. Sankalpajam, the desired result. Vishnu, of Lord Vishnu. Padaseva, by serving the lotus feet. Upasaditam, obtained. Prapya, having achieved. Sankalpa, of his determination. Nirvanam, the satisfaction. Na, not. Atiprita, very much pleased. Abhyagat, he returned. Puram, to his home. So translation, despite having achieved the desired result of his determination by worshipping the lotus feet of the Lord, Dhruva Maharaj was not pleased. Thus he returned to his home. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. By worshipping the lotus feet of the Lord in devotional service, as instructed by Narada Muni, Dhruva Maharaj achieved the desired result. His desire was to get a very exalted position, excelling that of his father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. And although it was somewhat childish determination, because Dhruva Maharaj was nothing but a small child, Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personalities of Godhead, is so kind and merciful that he fulfilled Dhruva's desire. Dhruva Maharaj wanted a resident more exalted than any ever occupied by anyone else in his family. Therefore he was offered the planet in which the Lord personally resides, and his determination was completely satisfied. Still, when Dhruva Maharaj returned home, he was not very much pleased. For although in pure devotional service there is no demand from the Lord, but because of his childish nature, he had demanded something. Thus, although the Lord also fulfilled his desire, he was not very pleased. Rather, he was ashamed that he demanded something from the Lord for which he should have not done this. The translation again: despite having achieved the desired result of his determination by worshipping the lotus feet of the Lord, Dhruva Maharaj was not very pleased. Thus, he returned to his home. There's many points. The purport is small, but there are quite a few points that we could discuss. But if anybody want to raise anything, please raise it as we're speaking. It's also okay, because we really normally don't have the time to discuss the philosophy. So I thought of a beginning of discussing, because his devotional service was kind of mixed. He was not pleased himself. And the definition of pure devotional service as given by Rupa Goswami, Anya Bilasada Sunyam Jnana Karmadi Anavritam Anukulena Krishna Anushilanam Bhakti Rutama. So this verse, it's given in the Madhya Leela, in the Madhya Leela, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, I think it's in the Madhya Leela, which talks about how we should render devotional service. And Rupa Goswami also discusses it elaborately in the nectar of in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which Prabhupada translates as the nectar of devotion. Actually, it's a summary of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. It's not like there's quite a lot to it, but it's just a summary. And the translation given in the there's different translation, and somehow I learned another translation which was given in the Bhagavad Gita in the 7th chapter, but this is like the first thing that I learned. When first-class devotional service develops, one must be devoid of material desires, knowledge obtained by monastic philosophy and fruit of action. The devotee must constantly serve Krishna favorably as Krishna desires. So in this instance we see Dhruva, although after serving Lord Krishna or serving the Supreme Lord, he was still not satisfied. And this happens sometimes, that after we do our service we still feel that there's something was lacking. And in the definition of pure devotional service, there are 3 primary characteristics. What is it? Devotional service is for Krishna. It must be done with a favorable intent, anukulena, and Krishna must be pleased. It must be for Krishna. So it's not that you can incidentally please Krishna. If you just incidentally please Krishna, then that's not in the category of pure devotional service. What's in the category of pure devotional service is you must have that intention to please Krishna, otherwise it's not bhakti. That intention must be there to please Krishna. So those are the primary characteristics, and the secondary characteristics are you must be free from ulterior motive, not covered by some philosophical or fruitive pursuits. just like in the purport we see that Dhruva had a desire to get a kingdom. So it was not on the category of pure devotional service. And that what made him dissatisfied. It has to be on that level. Just like the Anya Bilas. Abhilas means desire. We should have no other desire except to please Krishna. But Rupa Goswami has added a suffix to it. Anya Bilas Ita, the Ita. There's a suffix. Which means that one should have no other basic motive except to serve Krishna. Because, we are conditioned souls and we may manifest some desires at some times. But we have not come to devotional service to get some material facility. It's not like that. Oh, we didn't come here to merge into the Brahman or to follow some impersonal philosophy. We have come to for the sake of pleasing Guru and Krishna. That is our intention, right? That is what we intend. We intend. That was our basic intention. But it happens sometimes in extreme situations. We may ask Krishna for something. For example, if somebody comes to kill us, then we will pray to Krishna, oh please save me. Is that in the category of pure devotional service? It's arguable. But ordinarily we won't pray to Krishna for the sake of the body. We don't do that. But in extreme situations, we may forget and pray to Krishna to save us. So such a temporary prayer in an extreme situation does not exclude us from pure devotional service. It doesn't. Because that is in a moment of danger we may identify with the body. And we may think of preservation of the body, then we may pray to Krishna. But as we said earlier on, the basic motive is engaging in devotional service. It's not for some material benefit. So as I said, if in danger and we call out for Krishna, that is not against pure devotional service. But as we mature in devotional service, then we change. We change, but as we mature at the time of death, we won't forget that we are the eternal servant of Krishna. And we won't identify with the body and pray for the protection of the body. So it's like an extreme situation. So in an extreme situation, we may pray, we forget everything, and we pray for Krishna to save us. So there is no harm. But as I said, we won't forget as we mature in devotional service that we are the eternal servants of Krishna. And we see that, in the purport it's mentioned that Dhruva Maharaj's immaturity was childish. And Prabhupada covers it in the purport. So that's Anya Bilasita. So in sadhana bhakti, we are not completely free from other desires. But they are not our real desires. Because our real desire is to serve Krishna. But because of some conditioning, bad habit, or some false identification with the body, we may want some, relief from material distress temporarily. But I found when I was reading last night, I found that earlier on in the verse, Prabhupada makes a nice point. He said in his purport, he says a devotee must be very sincere in his devotional service. Then although there may be many things wrong on the devotee's part, but Krishna will guide him and gradually elevate him to the highest position of devotional service. it's a very nice point that he had made. So we find in the purport that also in the outset, where Dhruva, where Narada Muni is mentioned, and the role of the spiritual master comes, and that is a detailed topic, but which is discussed a little bit in the Nectar of Devotion. Raghunath ki, and the Hari Bhakta Vilas, give guidance to the rules and regulations that a Vaishnava should follow. And Rupa Goswami, proposes or mentions only the basic principle, but not the details. Now the basic principle is one has to accept a spiritual master. But exactly how one follows the spiritual master is considered a detail. And he gives an end in the Nectar of Devotion. It's given like, if, for example, if you're following the instruction of your spiritual master and it differs from the instruction of another spiritual master, so this becomes like a detailed information. But the basic principle of accepting a spiritual master is good for everyone. So Rupa Goswami doesn't get too much into the detail, but he mentions those basic principles that we should take shelter of the lotus feet of a bona fide spiritual master, become initiated by him, accept his orders, follow in the footsteps of the acharyas, and inquire from the spiritual master to advance in Krishna consciousness. So we find that Dhruva Maharaj was very fortunate that he had a bona fide spiritual master, and he was able to, despite his condition and his desire to have a kingdom, he was successful in that he could go back to Godhead. But the interesting thing of Narada Muni being a bona fide spiritual master was, there's an earlier discussion in one of the purports where Dhruva Maharaj was talking with his mother Suniti of all the incidents that took place in the palace. And Narada was not present at that point. But then when he came, he was able to tell everything, all what was discussed. So did he hear all the topics, all that was discussed between the two of them? Well, the answer is that Narada is a Trikalagya, a person. He's so powerful that he knows past, present, and future, and he was able to know what transpired, and then Dhruva took everything very seriously, and with strong determination he was executing devotional service. Here we see that he met a bona fide representative, and that's also important. And Prabhupada speaks about accepting a spiritual master who's in the line of disciplic succession, who's bona fide, who's on the highest level. And in many purports he wrote that we should, at least in the Nectar of Instruction, he wrote that we should aspire to obtain a spiritual master who's on the highest level. So because Narada Muni because Dhruva Maharaj was so determined, then Krishna arranged for a perfect spiritual master to be sent to him. And what is the duty of the spiritual master? The duty of the spiritual master is to teach the disciple how to give up materialistic life. That is the duty of the spiritual master. And the disciple's duty is to do so. Is to give it up, materialistic life. It's not that this, as Prabhupada puts it, that the spiritual master will give a mantra and then will ask for some money. Then you will become very expert in materialistic life. Then that's not the duty of a spiritual master. Rather, the spiritual master teaches the disciple how to give up materialistic life, and the disciple's duty is to assimilate his instructions. That is the duty of the disciple, and to follow the path back to Godhead. So the spiritual master also tests the disciple, his determination, and we find that Dhruva Maharaj was tested. So and he passed the test, and this is the process also for accepting a disciple. The spiritual master tests the disciple, and then he took initiation. Yet, as Prabhupada writes, the great sage Narada has come to Dhruva under the direction of the Supreme Personality of God just to initiate him. Yet he is testing Dhruva's determination to execute the process. It is a fact, however, that for a sincere person, devotional service is very easy. But for one who is not determined and sincere, the process is very difficult. So determination comes from following the principles also. As we follow the principles more and more strictly, then we get determined. And we find that that Narada Muni, because of his association with the Bhaktivedantas, with those sages, they imparted that scientific knowledge. And then they left. But still, Prabhupada writes in his purports that Naradaji was impregnated with spiritual knowledge by the grace of great sages. There was a tangible change in his life, although he was only a boy of 5 years. That's we're talking about Narada Muni. So when he had given initiation to Dhruva Maharaj, it also had a tangible change in his life. There was a difference. And this is an important symptom visible after initiation by the bona fide spiritual master. And there's many things can be said. But then even when Narada Muni took initiation, or when he was impregnated with this knowledge, he got attached to chanting the holy names of the Lord. Seriously chanting. And as it said in one of the purports, as such a devotee after his initiation by the Lord or his bona fide representative takes very seriously to chanting of the glories of the Lord and traveling all over the world so that others may also hear the glories of the Lord. Such devotees have no desire for material gain. So the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra is important, and the more we chant, the more we chant attentively. If we chant attentively, then we'll become free from material desires. Because sometimes we're chanting and we're thinking of so many things. We conditioned souls, so there's so many desires come up. And normally when you're chanting, it comes up more than other times. Because you're cleansing your heart, it's coming up. So then you may think, well, then I should stop chanting, And as Prabhupada gives the example that, if you're cleaning the carpet, or the dust will come up. So should you stop cleaning? So we continue. So that is one of it. That's important for us to chant properly. Especially in the mornings, we come together and we chant. We can chant with Prabhupada. We can chant with Tulsi Devi. We can chant in an environment with the devotees. But we must be able to hear ourselves. Because there's a lot of obstacles in devotional service, and if we have material desires, as you see in the purport, Dhruva Maharaj was not pleased to, after, even though he was going to get liberation. He was still not pleased because he had not executed, according to him, pure devotional service. Because he had some desire. But then I explained, how from looking at Rupa Goswami, how that in conditioned life we may have desires. But the important thing is that we have to make a concerted effort. We have to understand our own shortcomings in devotional practices, because sometimes we may just overlook it, and those obstacles we overlook it also has a bearing in our advancement in Krishna consciousness. So here we find that Dhruva was regretful. He was regretting, because he was regretting that he had these desires. So remorse is a very, very important factor in devotional practices. We must be remorseful. Even we find in the life of Srila Prabhupada that he sometimes regretted, chastising his disciples at times, as they were Vaishnavas. And there was one example, that was one pastime I was reading of Abhiram Prabhu, who had a tiff with his wife, and Srila Prabhupada got knowledge of it. And then Srila Prabhupada then started speaking about his own life, his own family life. And with great sincerity and humility he said, "My wife was very tolerant. That was her great qualification. And to this day I regret how harsh I was." So, but what can I do? I have a hot temper. But I also read other places that he was like, to his son he was saying, "Your mother was a good person. It was me." So he was genuinely meaning it, not like, just, it was just words or something like that. A genuine feeling. So they are all Vaishnavas. So, but anyway, like even devotees, some, when devotees took sannyas, some were not so mature, but due to emergency, Prabhupada was giving sannyas to expand the movement, and they had different views, about how they should practice, how they should sleep, what they should wear, and how they should worship the danda, or offering food, or things like that. And then Prabhupada explained it, and I'll just read it. "Sometimes you will be in the home of a rich man, and sometimes you'll be in the home of a poor man. When you're in the home of a rich man, you may see different paraphernalia, but you should not desire to have it." That's for a sannyasi, that's for renunciants. You may think, I once had so much wealth. I could have attained this level of enjoyment if I had continued. Maybe I could try again. That attraction may be there, but we should be careful. Or similarly, when some young lady may come, then you would think, you will also think of that enjoyment. Said we have to be careful. The way he said it, "But these thoughts are forbidden. You should not have any remorse over what you have done by taking sannyas." So we should not try, even for our own selves as practitioners in Krishna consciousness, we should not hope to get material wealth, or if you can get it for Krishna and use it in Krishna service, it's very good. But we also have to be very, very careful. And that we have to, and our association is important. So we're speaking about remorse, and we find that, Dhruva had regrets. So we must feel remorse. It is not possible to skip over remorse to rectification. You must become remorseful first. Because then, gradually, because no one likes guilt or remorseful, nobody likes that. But the Vaishnava Siddhanta is very, very deep. There's deep remorse in the spiritual sense. And the example given some years ago when I was speaking in Cape Town, I remember giving this example. It said, after Ajamil is saved at the time of death by the Vishnu Dutas, he felt deep regret for his sins. Prabhupada comments in his purport, not only should one give up his past bad habits, but he must always regret his past sinful acts. This is the standard of pure devotion. So there must be regret. This is from the purport of the 6th canto. And even in our practices, we may behave improperly sometimes. We may deviate from the process. And sometimes when people deviate from the process, they may not regret their actions. And then others find out about their deviation. So although they may feel disturbed about a deviation, they may feel more disturbed that other people know, rather than feeling genuine remorse about their behavior. So, because because they may be honored by society, they may be in high positions in our institution, so they may feel bad, but still we have to be regretful and remorseful, because if we don't do that, then we won't grow in consciousness, we won't advance spiritually, and we'll continue to sin in the hope that others will not catch us. So we must look also deeper into our own life, be more introspective, to root out the seeds that can surface from time to time. We must look, and just like how even Dhruva Maharaj, although he was so successful, but still he was still not pleased, because he knew that he had some desire. So, we cannot just cut the top of the weed, because the rain and sun will nourish the seed and it will grow again. And we have to be very, very careful. And if we don't do that, then gradually we develop material desires and become offensive to the spiritual master, and we may deviate from the process. But Srila Prabhupada, he dealt with we all have material desires. We came with ulterior motives to the movement, probably some of us. And sometimes his disciples, fell down. He, like one sannyas disciple, Hanuman Prabhu, who was sannyasi, he had fell down from the standard, and he got married. But then he came to Prabhupada and he said, and he was explaining, like how Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had a disciple named Chota Haridas, whom he rejected from his association because he was lusty after women. So, and then he was explaining his own situation, that he took sannyas and the same thing happened to him. And he was asking Prabhupada whether Prabhupada will reject him. And there was a heavy silence followed by Prabhupada for a while, and he sat with his head bent down. But after a long pause, then he looked up to Hanuman and he said quietly, I'll read it. He can spread this movement all over the world in 1 second, referring to Lord Chaitanya, without the help of anyone if he likes. I am not God. I'm simply a servant of God. I require so much assistance to help me spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. If someone renders even small service to help me, I'm eternally indebted to him. You have rendered so much service to me. How could I reject you? How could I? The devotees were moved, amazed by the depth of Srila Prabhupada's compassion. So then we may say, like, in the way it's explained, when somebody takes sannyas and then falls down from the process, it's like eating your own vomit, something like that. But here we see that, Prabhupada's compassion, that even if somebody falls down, he can still make it in this lifetime. Because, because of his compassion, and Krishna will fulfill his desire. So then Hanuman said, well, then he spoke about his son, whom he named Bhaktivedanta. And Prabhupada said, you shouldn't have named him that, because sometime you'll be chastising him. It's like you're chastising me, like the Guru. So then he felt a little disturbed, and then anyway, we are accustomed to, he said we are accustomed to calling him that, and Prabhupada said it's okay, it's Bhaktivedanta Das. So he's a servant of Bhaktivedanta. So like that we have many, we may have many shortcomings. We identify our shortcomings and we rectify it, become remorseful like Dhruva Maharaj, and then we can advance in Krishna consciousness more and more. So I'll stop here. There's about few minutes. We can get some comments. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Hemlata Mataji.
Hare Krishna. You mentioned that one of the three signifiers of pure devotional can you hear? Well, one of the three signifiers of pure devotional service is doing service only for the pleasure of Krishna. Sometimes devotees say that the best way to know that Krishna is pleased is by devotees, that devotees are pleased. But it happens that oftentimes for the same service you get a very differing reviews from devotees. Some people are pleased by it, some not at all. So what to do in that case?
So how do you decide if Krishna is pleased? Well, Prabhupada said, also that was the statement that I heard, that if the devotees are pleased, then Krishna is pleased. But then you may get envious devotees, you may get different types of devotees. So best is to get a group of mature devotees, who are like of good standing, and get their inputs on whether Krishna was pleased, and then maybe give them the prasadam to taste. So like that they will say, well, it's nicely cooked. Like Giriraj Maharaj, he often tests. Not that he, despite of his health conditions, he may not be able to eat certain things, but he will ask. Some maha will come from the deities, and then he will take. And at one time he was not pleased with something, so he could tell just by taking that prasadam that this was maybe buffalo milk or something like that. It wasn't from cow's milk. But it's a group of mature devotees, because they like, I was going around to different homes with one devotee, and wherever he went, he said, the lady, you're the best cook. So, you're the best cook. So one point, I got so tired, I said, no, he says this everywhere. So it's best to you can engage in different types of devotional service, but just like the example of you into sewing and for the deities, and there was one incident of how the person stayed up all night, the husband and wife, making the tulsi skirt, and when the president walked in, who made that dress? It was he was not pleased with it. But then Prabhupada walked in and he said, who made the dress? Then they started crying when the president said that. But then when Prabhupada walked in, he saw who made this beautiful dress. And then they were crying again. So both times they were crying, but one time they were crying with pain, and the next time they were crying with pleasure, with ecstasy. So that's the way I think. Does it make sense?
Yes, very much. Thank you. The other question is, if it's okay, I can ask another one. You mentioned that Rupa Goswami didn't go much into certain details in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, but you did mention briefly also there's, let's say there's gurus who have differing opinions on something. Can you elaborate on that?
So, who have different rules? Some other acharyas? Oh.
No. I mean our gurus, our bona fide ISKCON gurus. If they have differing sort of instructions, or let's say also opinions, one is pleased by something and the other one not necessarily. How to deal with that?
Yeah, I think as I took it from the nectar of devotion, I just want to get back to it. I just want to that it's because Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, as I said, is more detailed, and Prabhupada in the nectar of devotion just encapsulated the important points, and therefore he broke it down and said what as I spoke about. He says the basic principle of detail. But the basic principle, the Srila Rupa Goswami does not wish to enter into the details here, but wants to place before us only the principles. So sometimes like the details, like what Krishna likes, that you'll have to ask the spiritual master. So that's a detail. Whether you're like Rasgulla or what. So therefore you need the spiritual master. So there's, the basic principle of accepting the spiritual master is important, but the details is given by the spiritual master. And you saw how Prabhupada dealt with different disciples differently. And sometimes there were contradiction probably in his instructions, He said one person to be the president, and he said the other sannyasi you have to go and preach. One be the president, one go preach, So so it's like that. And also, even for ourselves, we may do some things differently from other temples also. Even in your, I don't know, in your deity department, I'm not so much a pujari, but I remember once I was corrected of how to do the arti for Tulsi Devi. You have to do the whole 4, 2, 3, 7. But I don't know where the feet is. I don't know where the navel is, so I just do it 7 times around. So when I was doing it, I was corrected by one devotee. So I asked the devotee who said him. He said me so and so said him. So when I asked that person who told him, so he said no, they heard this in the deity ministry course in Mayapur. I wrote to the person. And I said, where is it prescribed? He said, it's not prescribed anywhere. He said, I do the same thing like what you're doing. So, you have to check things out. People say different things at different times. But it's good to check it out also. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to comment? Jai, you want to say anything? So thank you very much. It's Hapa said, Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam ki. You take this away from me, sorry.